Borthakur IAS Academy, an endeavor of excellence.
Borthakur IAS Academy.
Hello everyone, welcome once again to Borthakur's IAS Academy, Northeast's premier institute for UPSC, APSC and NPSC preparations. This is your one-stop solution for any news and update which will help you to prepare for your civil services examination, and along with that it is also going to be beneficial for any other state government services. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Facebook as well as Instagram. So the first news of today is related to environment and biodiversity, which will be tagged under the GS paper 2 and 3. It is regarding the emerging markets for all the renewable sources of energy. This news came after a recent report which was published by India's Council on Energy, Environment and Water along with the financial think tank Carbon Tracker. They said that fossil fuel electricity generation has peaked worldwide as emerging markets seize the opportunities of low-cost renewables. Now, the key major findings of this report says that emerging markets are the key to global energy transition. They are accounting for almost 88% of all expected growth in electricity demand from 2019 to around the year 2040. And with the right policies in place, technology and cost barriers to change, they can be crossed. The transition, however, is different in case of different emerging markets because they have electricity demand growth from a lower base, and also they need to provide access to around millions of people. Mostly in developed markets, the demand for fossil fuels for electricity generation has come down by almost 20% since the year 2007. Coming to emerging markets, there are four key groups of this market. First is China, which is nearly half the electricity demand, and around 39% of the expected growth comes from China. Then there are importers of coal and gas like India or Vietnam. They provides for a third of the demand and nearly half of the growth. Then we have the coal and gas exporters like the countries of Russia and Indonesia, which accounts for 16% of demand and only around 10% of growth. And lastly, the fourth key is all the fragile countries or states like Iraq or Nigeria, which accounts for 3% of demand and around the same share of growth. Now here, India has set an example by accounting for 9% of emerging market electricity demand and about 20% of expected demand growth. This clearly illustrates the speed and scale of change that India has experienced in the recent years. From less than 20 gigawatt in solar in the year 2010, India has grown to provide for 96 gigawatt of solar, wind biomass and small hydro in the year 2021. It also includes the larger hydropower renewables, which provides for 142 gigawatt or about 37% of our country's power generation capacity. Now, India is targeting to reach 450 gigawatt by the year 2030. At the same time, the demand for fossil fuel generation has declined in 2018, and it is falling down. It is coming down in the year 2019 and 20. It has decreased in 2019 and 20. However, there are chances that fossil fuel demand might again increase in the near future in order to meet the latent energy demand. A supportive policy environment is the most important factor to drive the growth of renewables in our country. The developed countries, they can speed up the transition to renewables in emerging markets by providing some policy support, technology expertise, and also by using development finance in order to reduce the cost of the capital. Now, coming to India's initiatives for renewable energy, then we can have a look at certain schemes and missions. First is the hydrogen energy mission, which was announced in the Union Budget of 2021-22. A national hydrogen energy mission will draw up a roadmap for using hydrogen as a energy source. And this initiative has the potential of transforming the scenario of transportation in our country. Second one is the Jawaharlal Nehru National Solar Mission, which was launched in the year 2009 with a target for grid-connected solar projects of 20,000 megawatt by 2020. This sector has also witnessed rapid development with installed solar capacity, which has increased rapidly from 18 megawatt to around 3,800 megawatt during the time period of 2010 to 2015. Then we also have the International Solar Alliance, PM Kusum. Kusum stands for the Kisan Urja Suraksha Evam Utthan Mahabhiyan. Then next one is the National Wind Solar Hybrid Policy. Along with that, we also have Rooftop Solar Scheme. This particular scheme is important and it's quite new. Okay, here the main objective is to generate solar power by installing solar panels on the roof of individuals' houses, and the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy is the implementing agency here. The second news is about the Amazon forests, which no longer serves as a carbon sink. They have started emitting carbon dioxide instead of absorbing it. The global trees and plants, they have taken up about a quarter of all fossil fuel emissions since 1960s, with the Amazon playing a major role as the largest tropical forest. Now, this Amazon tropical forest, it occupies the drainage basin of the Amazon River and its tributaries in northern South America. Tropical forests, these are closed canopy of forests which grow within 23 degrees of north or south of the equator. These are generally very wet places that receives more than 200 centimeters of rainfall per year, either seasonally or throughout the entire year. The temperatures here are uniformly high, ranging from 20 degrees centigrade to 35 degrees centigrade. Such forests are mainly found in Asia, Africa, Australia, South America, and on many of the Pacific islands. The Amazon rainforest, they cover about 80% of the Amazon basin and are home to nearly a fifth of the world's land species. Along with that, it is also home to about 30 million people and covers 6 million square kilometers, which is almost twice the size of our country. The Amazon basin, it produces about 20% of world's flow of fresh water, which ultimately goes to the ocean. Now, coming to the report, a significant amount of deforestation in the eastern and southeastern Brazil, it has been reported, okay, over the course of 40 years, and this might have mainly affected the long-term decrease in rainfall and increase in temperature, specifically during the dry season. Not only the Amazon rainforest, some other forests of Southeast Asia have also turned into carbon sources in the last few years. It has mainly resulted from the formation of plantations and fires. Also, we can see that since the year 2013, the forest fires have mostly doubled, and this forms the major source of emission towards the environment. A large part of the Amazon is emitting carbons even without fires, which is particularly a matter of concern. This was most likely the result of each year's deforestation and fires, making the adjacent forests more susceptible the next year. What is the main reason behind deforestation? The state policies, mostly they encourage economic developmental activities like railway, construction of road expansion projects, etc. And this have led to the unintentional deforestation, mostly in Amazon and Central America. Thirdly, we are going to discuss the geographical phenomenon of landslide and flash floods, which are quite interconnected these days, okay? And this news popped up because of the incidence of heavy rainfall, which was caused by flash floods and followed by landslides in many parts of Himachal Pradesh recently. Coming to landslide, we all know what is landslide. It is defined as the movement of a mass of rocks or debris down the slope of earth, and they are a type of mass wasting which is denoted by any downward movement of rock or soil under the direct influence of gravity. Then the term landslide, it encompasses 5 modes of slope movement, which can be falls, topples, slides, spreads and flows. Okay, these are the 5 terms of slope movement which mainly describes the condition of a landslide. Coming to the major causes of landslide, these are caused due to 3 major factors, which can be geology, morphology and human activity. Geology, it mainly refers to the characteristics of the material. Okay, the earth or the rock area, it might be quite weak or structured in that place, and they might have different layers which have different strengths and stiffness. This may result in sudden movement of rocks or debris down the slope. Then morphology, it refers to structure of the land. Example, when we consider slopy areas, if they have lost their vegetation due to fire or drought, they are more vulnerable towards landslides. This is mainly because the vegetation, it kind of holds the soil in place with the help of its root system. Otherwise, the land becomes quite easy to slide away. Human activities, they have always, triggered any kind of natural calamity. Most of the human activities, they have been quite detrimental towards the environment. In the name of constructional activities, we are causing harm to our environment. Human activities like agriculture and construction, they increases the risk of a landslide in an already vulnerable area. The entire Himalayan tract, the mountain areas and terrains of northeastern India, then Western Ghats, these are quite landslide prone areas. Coming to mitigation, what all we can do in order to control the situation. First, we'll have to restrict the various constructional activities and other developmental activities, such as building of roads or coming up with new dams in such vulnerable areas. Then limiting our agricultural activities in to the valleys and areas with moderate slopes. Then we have to control the development of large settlements. Okay, extra pressure in any landslide prone area can further deteriorate the situation. We must promote a large scale afforestation and construction of bunds in order to reduce the flow of water in such areas. Terrace farming, it needs to be encouraged and popularized among the northeastern hilly states, where still chuming cultivation or the slash and burn method of cultivating crop is still prevalent. There are many steps which has been already taken by government, but still we'll have to work a lot. The Geological Survey of our country have done a susceptibility mapping. Mapping means figuring out the vulnerable areas. Okay, they have done it for around 85% of the 4,20,000 square kilometer landslide prone area of our country. And then these areas have been divided into different zones depending upon their propensity of the disaster. Improvement in early warning systems, then monitoring the susceptibility, it can also further reduce the damages which can be caused by landslides. Then let us come to flash floods. Flash floods are sudden surges of water levels which generally occurs following an intense spell of rain, and they are highly localized events of short duration with a very high peak, and usually they last less than 6 hours. This flood situation, it further worsens the condition of choked drain lines or any blocked passage or any encroachment obstructing the natural flow of water. Coming to the causes of flash floods, it can be caused by heavy rainfall which are associated with severe thunderstorm, hurricane, etc. Flash floods can also occur due to the breakage of dams or levee, and also due to mudslides. In areas which are near to volcanoes, flash floods can occur after eruption of volcanoes when glaciers have been melted by intense heating. Next, we are going to discuss the pollutant of water, which is detergent. The water pollution caused by detergents has become a big concern in the global context recently. Per capita consumption of detergent in India is around 2.7 kg per year. Coming to water pollution, we all know it occurs when harmful substances like any chemical or microorganism that it enters the water body and contaminates it, thereby degrading water quality and rendering it toxic to humans or environment. Water is uniquely vulnerable to pollution because it has the capacity to dissolve more substances than any other liquid on earth, and that is also the reason why water is known as the universal solvent. Now, coming to the sources of water pollution, it can be divided into two parts: point sources and non-point sources. Any pollutant which is discharged from a specific location, like a drain pipe which is carrying industrial effluents and is being directly discharged into the water body, it represents a point source pollution. Then the discharge of pollutants from a diffused source or from a larger area, like the runoff from agricultural fields, grazing lands, construction sites, or any abandoned mines and pits, etc., these are termed as non-point sources. Now let us have a look at this detergent. Okay, what is its chemical property? A detergent is a surfactant or mixture of surfactants. It has some cleansing properties in dilute solution with water, and a detergent is quite similar to soap. So surfactant, what is it? It's a surface active agent which when added to a liquid, it reduces its surface tension, and as a result the spreading capacity and wetting properties of that surfactant, it increases. Surface tension is another property on the surface of a liquid which allows it to resist any external force. Now, how this detergent is causing pollution? There are many different reasons why detergent is seen as a major pollutant of water. First is because of bioaccumulation of nonyl phenol. Nonyl phenol is a hazardous chemical which is present in detergents, and it is also known to enter the water bodies and the food chain. It results in bioaccumulation and cause serious environment and health risks to the living organisms. And this nonyl phenol, it has been detected in human breast milk, urine and blood, and is associated with reproductive and developmental effects in the rodents. Second problem is the inhibition of biodegradation. Many laundry detergents, they contain around 35 to 75% of phosphate salts, which can cause a variety of water pollution problems. Then, for example, the phosphate, it tends to inhibit the biodegradation of any organic substance. The non-biodegradable substances, they cannot be eliminated by public or private wastewater treatment. We all know what is biodegradation. It is the process by which any organic substance is broken down into smaller units by the living organism. Then also some phosphate based detergents, it can cause eutrophication. What is eutrophication? It when a water body becomes overly enriched with certain minerals or nutrients, it induces excessive growth of algae or algal bloom. This condition of excessive growth of algae is known as algal bloom, and this deprives the availability of oxygen in water, which results in death of other aquatic microorganisms. And there has been a case in Belgium when phosphates have been restricted for use in household detergents since the year 2003 because of eutrophication. Another cause is oxygen reducing substances. Detergent, they contain many oxygen reducing substances. That is a chemical compound which readily transfers oxygen atoms, and this may cause damage to the fishes and other marine animals. This also tends to reduce the availability of oxygen in the water body where it gets accumulated. Okay. Then it also makes the water turbid, which is a quite visible phenomena, right? A few more harmful components of detergents, which are anthropogenic components like herbicides, then pesticides and heavy metal concentrations, they cause the water to grow dark. Okay, it makes the water quite opaque, and this blocks out the light and disrupts growth of plant underneath. Turbidity also clogs the respiratory system of some of the fish species, and pathogens from these toxic water bodies, it can cause very fatal diseases in both human as well as animals. And it is quite obvious that detergents are quite hazardous for humans as well. They are suspected to have some carcinogenic properties, okay, which can aggravate cancer in human body. Any carcinogen is an agent which has the capacity to cause cancer in human body. So this was all for today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you all will like it. Please like and share this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'll see you all again tomorrow with another segment of Current Affairs 365 only on Borthakur's IAS Academy, Northeast's premier institute for UPSC, APSC and NPSC preparations. Till then, take care, keep learning. Bye-bye.
Borthakur IAS Academy. প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা।
বৰঠাকুৰ আয়ে